Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, January 22nd, and this is the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Thank you for joining us. Why don't we start off with the roll call?
Commissioner Fay?
Here.
Commissioner Kadigian?
Here.
Commissioner Laurie?
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan?
Flanagan, here.
And Commissioner Jesmadarin is not here today.
Great. Thank you very much. Next up on our agenda is the consent items. Do we have would you like to read that into the record and we'll ask for a motion to approve?
Yes. Approval of the November 4th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Fellow commissioners, anyone make a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. We'll call for a vote on that.
Jasmine Kadigian?
Yes.
Fay?
Yes?
Laurie?
Yes.
Flanagan?
I'll abstain. Flanagan, you got it. I'll abstain.
Great, thank you. Item 3, commission and staff comments. I'd like to exercise my privilege and make a few comments, introductions here. First, I'd like to welcome Commissioner Flanagan back to the dais here at the Glendale Water and Power Commission. He served on this commission for about 2 years in a previous stint, and is professionally an expert in energy efficiency and demand response, and really happy to have you back, and thank you for volunteering your service.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
On comings and goings, I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge that this is likely the final meeting of our interim general manager, Manny Robledo. Manny stepped into this role on fairly short notice and has been great steward to keep this organization stable through the transition. So we just really appreciate your service coming back to help the city of Glendale, and thank you very much. And we hope that you're more successful at staying retired after this job is over.
I appreciate that. It's been a pleasure being here, serving.
Now, turning to a sadder subject, our community was rocked in the last couple of weeks by some pretty devastating wildfires. At this latest count, the fires have killed at least 27 people, destroyed more than 10,000 structures, and rendered countless more unsafe to live in. We now have tens of thousands of essentially climate refugees in our city who are scrambling to find housing. Schools are destroyed. It's been a pretty rough situation. I'd like us to take a moment of silence to acknowledge the loss. So please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. I think it's important to note that while Glendale was largely spared the worst of this disaster, that's probably just an accident or chance by literally the way the wind blows. And looking forward to, I see you prepared some comments and a brief summary of what the impacts were in Glendale. And as we approach the agenda forecast for this meeting, I'd like to welcome commissioners to join me in asking for a follow-up report on how we can ensure that our city is as prepared as we can be for this kind of event. So we'll come back to that later in the agenda. Would any other commissioners like to make any comments at this time? Thank you. I would also like to acknowledge and thank you to my fellow commissioner for reminding me that Commissioner Peterson is not here today. The last meeting we had is his last meeting on the commission. He has resigned his seat or given way so that Commissioner Flanagan can join us. Commissioner Peterson was a great mentor to me coming in here. He was the president when I first joined this commission, somebody who's been involved in civic life here in Glendale and in every community that he's lived in as a volunteer for decades, and also professionally given his whole career to public service through higher education. So really sharp guy, great contributor, and we're going to miss him on this commission, but we wish him all the best. So thank you for that reminder. And one other kind of technical comment, maybe we can address in the management team's opening comments. There was another fire, this time at a utility facility in Northern California near Monterey. it looks on the surface to be a similar type of facility to what Glendale is planning to build to replace the Grayson plant. I understand there are some important differences, and for anyone who might be a little nervous about that, this might be a good forum to, on the record, explain what the differences are and how we're going to kind of mitigate that. So if that's acceptable to do within the scope of management comments, I think we'd like to do that as well. So, thank you. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President, fellow commissioners. I prepared some remarks, just a couple of things I want to touch on, including the windstorm. We were fortunate, as you said, not to have the fires in Glendale, but we did have a significant impact from the windstorm that affected primarily our overhead facilities, our overhead lines that are exposed to the heavy winds. Would you put up the comments, please? I'm going to start with something that we commissioned through our inter-utility agency, Southern California Public Power Authority. Every year we do a comparison of electric rates to other utilities, and here are the results that we have. I'll preface this by saying that, you know, it's our one of our top goals to be affordable and keep our rates competitive. Unfortunately, with the capital expenditures that we're making to replace the Grayson plant and the increases in costs, our rates have climbed a little bit, but we are still on par with Southern California Edison, and we're below San Diego Gas and Electric and Pacific Gas and Electric. So what you have here is an average residential bill, about 750 kilowatt hours per month, and Glendale is the last blue bar that you see there. So we also did commercial rates. Next slide, please. Commercial, we're about the same, one less. We're on par with Southern California Edison, but we're below San Diego Gas Electric and Pacific Gas Electric. We keep this in mind when we make our decisions for purchases and for the way we manage our business, because number one is reliability and sustainability and affordability. So and of course safety, both employee safety and public safety. So I just thought I'd share this with the commission and continue with the wildfires. So this is a slide that was prepared by the city. It not only shows our impacts, but it shows what the city did. So even though we didn't have fires, we had our emergency operations center fully activated. We had our communication staff engaged with our customers. Because the fire did approach the city in the north, Eaton Canyon and Glen Oaks Canyons were, not Eaton Canyon, Chevy Chase and Glen Oaks were evacuated, and that took a lot of communication with the customers. We had 709 incidents, 146 wires down, 23 evacuation assists, arcing wires. We had emergency calls. We had social media and all media outlets engaged to stay in communication with our customers. We also had centers where the customers could gather that were displaced from the evacuation. If they didn't have any place to go, then we set up shelters, and we had volunteers from the community providing food and assistance. So it was a really, it was a test for the city, and I think the city performed very well, including water and power, but it was fire department, police department, public works. There were a lot of trees down, a lot of trees needed to be picked up to clear the roads. It was just an all-out effort, and it was exciting to be part of that and to see how our crews responded and to work with staff and the community. So it's just an update on, and all Glendale Water and Power customers were restored on the 14th, which was exactly 1 week later. So we'll get into a little more detail. Go ahead and continue. So we experienced 60-mile-an-hour winds. In total, we had about a third of our customer base out of service, not all at one time. You know, I think the maximum that we had out at one time was 12,000, but, you know, we had different 51 feeder circuits come and go. A feeder circuit comes out of the substation. It serves 1,000 to 1,400 customers, so we had 51 of those. To give a little context, we experienced like 100 feeder circuit outages in a year. So we had, in 2 days, we had half of as many as we had in a year. So we did tax our staff. We engaged mutual aid crews from Anaheim, Riverside, and a contract crew. We prioritized the work to clear the lines for public safety and also to restore as many customers each tranche as possible. So we focused on isolating the damage and restoring the balance of the circuit. And that took some time because as we would restore circuits, then more would go out. And we just kind of, during that night, it was really incredible, the amount of debris. It was mainly debris that would come in contact with our high voltage lines at the top of the pole. And because we have such good protection, when anything goes across those lines, then it interrupts the circuit and the circuit goes out. And I do have some comments about wildfire prevention, and that's part of it. It's our protection system. Our crews literally worked 24/7. They rested on property. They didn't go home. We had tree crews. In addition to our line crews, we also had tree crews. We have a contractor that was on site and fully engaged, clearing the debris. We had trees falling on our lines, etc. And as I said, everything was at 9:48 p.m. on the 14th. Everything was restored. Next slide, please. This is a summary of our wildfire prevention plan. It was fully engaged during the windstorm. We de-energized the sub-transmission line that goes over the hill to La Crescenta. That's considered a Tier 3 fire zone. So when we had the red flag warnings, we de-energized that, and we didn't interrupt any customers because we have redundancy. So we were able to serve our customers with that line out of service. We disabled all of our auto reclosers. What that is, because a common way a line will go out is a palm frond or a branch or a mylar balloon come in contact, but a lot of times, more than half of the time, it'll clear, and then the circuit could just go right back on. So we have this within 10 seconds, it tests it. And because of the increased fire danger, we disabled that. So we did not test any circuits until it was fully patrolled with eyes on the entire circuit to make sure that we weren't going to close into something and create a fire. Preventing ignition is part of the wildfire prevention program. So we patrolled the circuits prior to de-energizing. For prevention, we have an annual program. We spend over $4 million a year clearing the vegetation around the high voltage lines. And I'll show you, it's the top lines that are bare, they're uninsulated, and they're 12,000 volts. They're very powerful. So we want to keep the vegetation away from those lines. So we've done that, and it did help. It's just that these winds, we haven't experienced anything like this. So it was causing trees to fall. A lot of trees fell instead of just branches touching. And then we do an inspection of our facilities, our poles, our lines, the cross arms, the underground cabinets. That's done every 5 years. And we've actually enhanced that with drones. We have drone technology that can go up and actually give us video footage of our facilities to see if there's anything wrong. We can, on a preventative basis, change that out. Next slide, please. Our water system held up very well. It wasn't taxed by fire hydrants, but even so, we had no problems whatsoever. we did have a power outage. Because of the power outage, we lost power to one of our water facilities. However, we were able to maintain water pressure with a backup portable generator that goes between manholes, and it's run with a diesel engine, and it's powerful enough to keep that supported. So that ran for almost 2 days, keeping that, it's in the New York Avenue area, keeping that, the houses in those hilly areas. The hilly areas, you have to pump the water up to a tank. So even though it's fed by gravity, something has to fill the tank. So you need a pump to fill the tank. So we were able to maintain it. We had no water issues, no water shortages, no water quality issues. The water quality issues you might have read about in Los Angeles and Pasadena had to do with two things. Pasadena had a fire go across one of their reservoirs that had a wooden roof, as I understand it. And because of that, it could possibly contaminate the water, so they issued a boil water notice. Los Angeles lost pressure, as was reported. And when a water system loses pressure, you can suck things in. So as long as the pressure is maintained, you're pushing things out, and the water quality is good because we've treated it with chlorine and filtered it. But once you lose pressure, then you could bring in contaminants. So they issued a boil water order in Los Angeles as well. We didn't have any of those issues. So that's a bright spot in our endeavor. Next slide, please. And I just have a few pictures. You can see the Eaton fire in a distance approaching Glendale, but thankfully never entered Glendale. Next. This is one of the worst damage. It's in the northwest part of Glendale's commercial area. It affected 27 customers, but to repair this, it took a lot of staff. We engaged a contractor with 30 line personnel to come in and fix it. And that did take a while because the commercial customers had backup means. They had their own generators. So we focused on residential prior to the commercial, but we did pick these people up prior to the 14th. Next. Here's some crews working. Next slide, please. You can see the tree and through the backyard in the middle. One thing I'll note here, if you can see where the lineman is working on the left picture, the top lines across the crossarm, those are uninsulated, those are high voltage. Those are very dangerous if, as I said, we have very good protection, so if they do fall, likely they'll be de-energized, but there is a chance they could be energized. But because they're bare and because they're high voltage, those are very dangerous. However, I want to distinguish that as you can't see it very well, but in that tree, there's some lines that are insulated, and those are like analogous to an extension cord in your home. They're insulated, they're low voltage, they're not as dangerous. And then below that, you have your communication lines, you have your cable and communication, telephone and fiber. Those are even lower voltage. So the ones you have to worry about are the top ones. Those are the ones we clear. The ones that are insulated are made to run through trees, so it's okay if we get a lot of calls, concern about wires. It's the top ones that we have to worry about. Next slide, please. Here's just a picture of staff working. The crew on the left is an Anaheim crew. They're one of our mutual aid, and we participate in a mutual aid coalition through Southern California Public Power Authority, and because Anaheim was not affected by the winds, they were able to send 2 crews to us. Same with Riverside. And to the right, you see our superintendents planning the work. A lot of planning goes into staging the material and making the repairs. Next slide, please. This is the diesel pump that we used, and I think I say the word diesel. I've said it twice because it's a specialized piece of equipment that is used for emergencies. And I know there's a lot of focus on fossil fuels and climate change, and we have, that's part of a big goal. You're going to hear today how big a part of a goal, but there's a place for that. And in my opinion, it doesn't belong in heavy fleet or emergency equipment. And this was a great, you cannot run this at night on solar. You cannot run it at night with a battery. You know, this is something that we need to keep the electricity on. So we keep the electricity on so we can drive our Teslas. But without the electricity, you can't drive the Teslas. So just a little plug for emergency equipment and having it placed until the technology changes. So the technology with research and development, maybe there's a better mousetrap in 10 years, and then we have something better that will work without requiring specialized charging and all that stuff. Next slide, please. This is another, this may be a gasoline backup generator, and this was another facility, water facility, that we used electricity to keep the pumps going. So 2 instances of emergency equipment that has a very low utilization rate, but it's there when you need it. Next slide, please. Oh, and that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Can we also maybe invite or address the fire at Moss Landing and how that may be similar or different to what we've planned?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it. I'd like to bring up Scott Mellon.
Great.
He's the Assistant General Manager in charge of power supply.
Thank you.
And he can address ours for sure. I don't know if he's aware of the Moss Landing one.
Well, I definitely am.
Okay, good.
Good afternoon. Yes, Scott Mellon, Assistant General Manager, Power Management. Yeah, so the Moss Landing fire, let's see, it, as of 5 hours ago, was under control. Still had hot spots that they were concerned about restarting, but essentially it burned for a little over 5 days. The chemistry of the batteries that were used there were NMC, which is, the long name for it is lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt oxide battery type. That's the chemistry structure. And that's the chemistry more commonly used for electric vehicles, especially when the electric vehicles first came onto the market. And the design for it was rack mount batteries in an enclosed building. So part of the reason why they lost so many, they lost over 80% of the batteries and a good chunk of that structure because of that design. Now, the type of batteries that we're using are lithium, it's LP, you know what, let me check. I want to make sure I say LFP, sorry, LFP. That particular chemistry is more stable, less likely to catch fire and have a sustained burn or cause a cascade effect. They still can catch fire, but one of the things that we've done in our design is we have an enclosure for individual battery sets, we have a distance between them, and we have a deluge system set up on each of those batteries. So the deluge, and you'll read about it, is not used to quench the fire of the battery that's lit, because that actually just kind of stabilizes it for a little bit, and when the water stops flowing, the fire reignites again, because it keeps a very hot core so the ignition source is still there. What the water is for keeping the fire from spreading to the neighboring batteries. So we maintain a large distance, and we have water surrounding those on those batteries if one ignites. All of our work has been coordinated with our fire department, so they're very familiar and, believe me, well up on the lithium concerns, lithium battery type concerns. So we've worked hand in hand, and so we've learned a lot from past incidents of batteries that have caught fire, and we're learning even more now from what came out of Moss Landing, but all those things that we learn are getting implemented into our site.
Great, thank you for addressing that. And just a short question is there anything you think we would change or reconsider in light of this new information, or is our design sufficiently different that it's kind of a different animal altogether?
It is very much a different animal. Obviously, we're going to look closely and find out what recommendations come out of that site. I'm sure there'll be some additional recommendations from fire review up there. So we'll take those seriously and see if we need to do any additional changes. But we do have all the recommended implementations already implemented, or at least in our design. So that'll be primary. Our primary focus will be mitigation on the fire.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fellow commissioners, any questions on either one of these topics?
I just had a question. The fire was limited to the battery storage at Moss Landing. You said the fire was, had been contained, but
Yes.
it didn't burn surrounding areas or anything. It was just,
Yes, it did not, it didn't leave the footprint of the overall building. If you see a layout for Moss Landing, it's a very big area, and there's different battery types, because it was kind of used as a proof of concept facility. So they use different chemistry types in different locations. You have different packaging. And this particular package was in an early stage development in a building. So it didn't get any further than that building on this one. It's unfortunate, though, that Moss Landing this is the fourth fire at that location, not specific to this particular battery set. So we are learning a lot from them.
Great, thank you very much. If there are no other questions or comments on item 3, we can move to item 4, oral communication.
Good, thank you. This is a year-end report. We have a fiscal year that ended June 30th.
I'm sorry, Mr. Robledo, I think we're on item number 4. There were no callers and
Oh, I'm sorry.
no members present. Just wanted to
No
confirm.
callers.
And no speaker cards in?
Speaker, no callers.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, now let's proceed to item number 5.
Item number 5, reports on information. Glendale Water and Power year-end review.
So this is a year-end review for fiscal year 2024. We prepared not only some financial information to compare our budget to actual, and also our financial condition showing the level of our reserves. But we've also incorporated some key performance indicators. I think this commission requested a little bit more in-depth look at what we do and how we're doing. So we've looked at each division. Next slide, please. Of Glendale Water and Power, and each one of the division managers will present their key performance indicators in detail. I'll just give a brief introduction for each one of them. We're going to start to the right. We have utility finance and risk management. We'll have a report on our 2024 actuals versus budget. We'll have our reserve projection, not only for this year's budget, but also our projection for our capital program to see how we're going to do for that. One of the things I'll mention is Glendale Water and Power is part of the city. We're not for profit, so our reserves tell us a lot. If we were a for-profit entity, then you have money going to shareholders, and then you have retained earnings. Well, we're pretty much what comes in goes out, and what's left over is an indication of how our rates are doing, collecting enough revenue to sustain our concern. So that's why we show the reserve projection. Next, we'll go to our power management organization. So water and power. Power is, we divide it up into power plants, power generation, power production versus power distribution. Power distribution is what you see around town, what we just looked at, the wires, the transformers, the substations. So for power, we've had a focus on clean energy and increasing the amount of renewable energy, and also looking at carbon-free energy. So we'll have a report on how we're doing that. And also conserving energy, helping our customers conserve energy for their own sake and for the sake of the environment. And then we have a focus on providing electric vehicle infrastructure so our customers can charge their electric vehicles. So we'll be hearing about that. For electric services, a focus is reliability. Very few outages have to do with power supply or power plants because we have so many power plants, so much redundancy. Most of the outages that we experience have to do with the local facilities, the wires, the the things you see around town, weather, the catastrophes like the windstorm that we just talked about. So we'll have a report on reliability, both how many outages and how long they take to restore. One thing about a system like ours, a very capital intensive system, it takes a lot of money to produce, so we cannot just let it deteriorate. We have to maintain it. We also have to plan on infrastructure replacement systematically so that we're not caught with a dilapidated system. So one of the things we're doing in electric is we're changing the 4 kilovolt circuits to 12 kilovolt circuits. They're able to serve more load. We're preparing for electrification and for expansion, and also taking the older equipment and replacing it with new equipment that'll last at least 30, 40 years. We've also been changing our streetlights to LED to use less electricity. We'll have a report on that. And both in water and electric, we support the expansion of our city. So if a customer comes in for a new building or an expansion, remodeling, we support that. We help them plan it out. We bring the infrastructure to them, and that's part of what we do. Water is very similar, except water supply and distribution are together. So we look for new supplies of water. We have some interest in expanding our recycled water program, both from a production and a distribution viewpoint, and replacing water mains, systematically replacing it so that we don't wind up with a very old system. And you'll see some statistics that we're doing pretty well as far as leaks go. Compared to others, it's a good report. And then finally, we have joint services that serve both water and electric, and that's our customer service organization and our overall safety program. We have a joint services organization that does that. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Asian. She's going to start with our money.
Members of the Commission, my name is Adriana Esayan. I am the Assistant General Manager overseeing the Utility Finance and Risk Management Division. The functions that I oversee include the Utility Finance section, which oversees the accounting and the budgeting of the utility finances, fleet coordination, which coordinates with the Public Works Department on fleet purchases of both vehicles and equipment needed that the fleet operation handles, the risk management function, as well as the power contract management function. Jumping right into just the numbers and overall what we want to cover for today. The goal is for us to kind of go over our cash reserves and show how solvent GWP really is and how we're in a great position, and we utilize all of our forecasting tools and models to make sure that we keep our finances healthy. Looking at the electric cash reserve trend, so GWP has a reserve policy of $124.1 million. That's just basically how much we want to have in our cash reserves. And as you can see, we ended fiscal year 23-24 with about $328 million in reserves. And we are looking to stay afloat of our policy up until the end of fiscal year 25-26, which is also the last year of our rate increases for our cost of service analysis. Next slide, please. Water cash reserves is also healthy. At the end of fiscal year 23-24, we have $46.4 million in cash reserves, and the reserve policy requires $11.3 million. Now, as you can see on this chart, we do fall below our policy limit in fiscal year 25-26. So we have commissioned a cost of service analysis for the water section. So we will be working on a COSA in the next year or so, and have a master plan, a water master plan in place to do the work to determine our CIP needs and set up a rate structure that supports the operation and keeping it afloat, our policy. Looking at our electric utility operational budget versus actuals, the goal here is to always end the year below budget or close to what was budgeted. And as you can see, in the last 3 fiscal years, we have been under budget, with fiscal year 23-24 ending about $82.3 million below our budgeted amount. Looking at the water utility, it's the same concept. We want to be below or close to budget, and as you can see, again, in the last 3 fiscal years, and particularly fiscal year 23-24, we are well below our budgeted numbers. Looking at our credit ratings for the year, for the last 3 fiscal years, we have not had a change in our credit rating by the rating agencies of Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's. Our goal is to be at investment grade, so BBB or above, and as you can see, we are high credit quality and very high credit quality from our rating agencies. And on the next slide, you will see it's the same with our water utility, both being very high credit quality ratings. Looking at our days of cash on hand, our goal is to have at least 200 days of cash on hand. Why this number? Because a lot of the rating agencies use it to determine solvency, and it's an important factor that goes into our ratings. So as you can see, for 6/30 year ended, we had 483 days of cash on hand for the electric utility, and on the next slide, you can see that we had 343 days. So well above our goal of 200 days for both utilities. This concludes my presentation on the numbers for the year end. I'm not sure if we're holding questions until the end or if you want to ask questions, but I'm happy to answer anything you may have.
Just in terms of the structure here, I think since we're going to have different speakers coming up and covering different topics, it'd be best if we ask questions as we go. Okay. Fellow commissioners, anyone have questions on this section?
I do, but maybe we both have the same questions. But anyways, with regards to slides 6 and 7, why were we so much below the budget for 23-24? I mean, it's a good thing, but
Yeah.
why?
The main reason is our purchase power budget. We budget significantly more than what we need just because we don't want to jeopardize providing the power if there is a need for it. And so it's just a reflection of how great that section performed in purchasing power and providing what was needed to keep the lights on, basically. And that's where the majority of the difference is. I think it's about 68 million out of that 82 is because of purchase power budget coming in under. And then there's a large chunk for natural gas purchases, fuel purchases. So it's the combination of those things. On the water side, it's the same thing. It's purchased water costs. Because we don't want to ever run into an issue of us not being able to purchase the power or the water because of budget limitations. We budget allow for contract encumbrances to be in place just in case we need it.
But if we enter into contracts to buy certain amount of power and we don't, and that causes us to be below the budget, is there a cost for buying more than what or reserving for more than what we need?
The reservation and the purchases are not happening. This is the budget versus what's actually in those contracts. It's just if we need to add additional funding to the contract, the appropriation has to exist in our system. Otherwise, we have to go back to council. So that's what this limitation is. It's not so much an agreement that's already in place to purchase it, and we're just not buying it. It's the capacity to purchase it. Okay, sure.
Just to follow on that, I imagine any surplus rolls back to the city general fund or rolls forward within the electric fund for the next year?
It goes back into the electric fund and the water fund. None of our fund balances close to the city's general fund. The general fund is a separate fund. We're a utility enterprise, and we have our own funds that would get any of our unspent appropriation.
Thank you.
It's even better than that. It never leaves it. And it's invested by our treasurer, so the money's invested.
I think it's similar, but the reserves is a very bright story you've told, but it sounds like the reserves are about 3 times the goal for reserves for both electric and water. Does that make sense?
For electric, the reserves are higher in 23-24 because we have the Grayson power plant project and the Shoal Canyon biogas project. So there's money that we're going to tap into. Those projects carry over from year to year until they're completed. So in some cases, you'll see a higher reserve, and then you'll dip into it when you're needing it. So in the future years, you see it drop off.
Right. And then what about the cash on hand? It seems like we have way more cash on hand than our goals.
So again, because we bonded for these projects and we have 2 tranches of bond money that we received, about 166 million for each tranche, we have a large cash balance that we have on the books. And once those projects
feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it shows that we're solvent, and these projects were planned for, and we're looking at the numbers and keeping afloat of making sure we're healthy. and aware.
I think that explanation makes a lot of sense, that we have some big expenses coming up, so we've got the cash ready to make those expenses.
Exactly.
You know, I think maybe a household example would be if you're going to go buy a new house, you want to start saving money so you can go buy that house. But I think we should all be mindful that the optics as we're raising rates on electricity, and it seems like we'll have to raise rates on water so we don't go negative on that reserve. There's the potential somebody who's not as well informed on the nuances might see, hey, the utility's sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars and they're asking us for more. So it's just incumbent on all of us to make sure that it's very clear that this money is for a specific purpose. It will be spent at some point in the next couple of years. You know, it's not just free money that's sitting around. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the point is we won't ask for more until we need it. So that's one of the reasons we showed the reserves, because that's a real indication of our condition.
Okay, great. Just one minor formatting comment. I think the axis label on the cash reserves ought to be thousands, or the labels, because those would be billions.
Go back, yes.
So these are not thousands of millions, right? These are
You're right.
thousands of thousands.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, thank you.
great. Any other questions on finance? No, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. Scott Mellon, AGM Power Management. I'm here to present the Power Management Division information. I wanted to start off by kind of giving you an indication of the sections of what we cover in each of the sections under my division. The Integrated Resource Management Group, that covers things like energy trading, commodity trading for natural gas. It looks at how we use our resources, including our transmission and our generation, and it plans out for how we're going to use it in the most economical way. So a lot of the conversation you were just having with Audrey about having the money available to do the things, that's the group that does a lot of that. In the Power Engineering Group, this basically a small group of elite engineers, very focused on understanding what the power group does, how we operate with the power plant, how we plan for the future, what possible grid changes need to go on, and how we, from an operational standpoint, what goes into contract management. So when we negotiate contracts, they're going to be working on that from an operational standpoint. Power plant, kind of self-explanatory. Those are the shift crews and management that make sure our lights stay on by the units staying on. And they'll be the same group that'll be taking over the batteries and taking over Shoal when those are built. Customer engagement. So this last year and a half, customer engagement came under the umbrella in power management. We think it was actually a very good move because of all the work that we were doing to engage with customers, especially with the large-scale projects that we had going on. And that's actually worked very well, especially with coordinating how we got access to customers and where we were talking about the products that we provide. Business support, that's kind of like our IT group within the utility-scape. They look at things like our applications, like for customer service, all the applications and distributed control systems and SCADA systems and all these ultra-high cybersecurity assets that we have. So that's kind of their bailiwick and what they focus on. You guys are all familiar with the Clean Energy Group because they do all the heavy lifting with how we do outreach and how we manage demand reduction or incentives to the customer base and kind of planning out what unique things we're doing, like establishing in-system PPAs. The next several slides we have are going to be focused primarily on that group. So this first slide, the first two slides are actually part of our power management group. So our IPS standards, the renewable portfolio standards come from essentially SB 100, which dictates where we're supposed to be on the scale of adoption. As you can see, we've had a pretty steady increase. Calendar year 2022, we were at 39.4%, 23 at 43.6, and our estimate right now is around 45%. We're still going through verification process for last year, but that's where we're headed. 2024 is the end of compliance period 4. 2025 is the beginning of compliance period 5. Our goal for 2025 is to have at least 46.7% increase in our RPS, or our total RPS. We've done a pretty good job in overshooting slightly as we go. The key for these compliance periods is to show a steady progress, and we've always shown a steady progress upward. We'll do the next slide. So there's a slight difference between RPS and what we see in the PCL, the power content label. Power content label includes our RPS. It's focused strictly on our retail load, but it also folds in zero carbon things like large hydro and nuclear. As you see, we've actually declined from 2022 to 2023 and on down. Our projected estimate is around 49% for 2024. The primary cause there is a significant reduction in hydro that's been available in the past. We are part owners in Hoover, and we also would utilize any excess hydro energy that could be coming from the Pacific Northwest. Because of the drought that's going on for the past few years, it's been hard to come by. So we've had to replace that with brown energy, so obviously it has an impact on our percentage. The other thing that's driving our percentage is that we are increasing our load. This last year, our current estimates show a 20% increase in total energy from the previous year. So with an increase in load, energy, not peak, energy overall, but that's pretty significant. With that increase and with, the lack of available zero carbon out there and the fact that we are pushing really hard to adopt our renewables in general, but we're having lots of problems getting the renewables to close because, basically we've gone through several issues where there's been renegotiations after terms have already been settled and after the agreement is almost done with vendors because they realize there are people out there willing to spend more. That's what it comes down to. So we're dealing with that on a regular basis. And our goal here is to achieve greater than or equal to 55% of that concentration of zero carbon for 2025. Next slide, please. All right, now this is primarily our clean energy group. As you can see here, we have steady increase in our charging ports, the city-owned specific charging ports that we've installed. 2022, we had 21, 23, we had 66, and 24, we have 78. We have several projects that we're working on right now to roll in additional charging ports, and we are working through a process of considering how we might privatize some of this. There are several companies that do this. They all have different structures to how they implement the business. We do have concerns about the impact of the cost of that energy once that energy passes from our hands to somebody else. So we're trying to consider how best to allow privatization to occur without having a significant impact on our customer base and people who might recharge. Our goal for 2025 is to get at least 12 more EV ports installed. I think it's important to note that we had a contract with Shell Energy. They're a peel-off from the primary company of Shell. This last year, that company basically dissolved. Shell decided they were no longer going to be involved in the electric vehicle structure business, so they've stepped away from it. And basically in June, we are working to figure out how we're either going to take over the electric vehicle chargers that we have installed that Shell was managing for us, or find somebody else to come in and do that for us. So like all things with this sector right now, it's very, I'll say malleable. Things are changing on a constant basis, so we're always trying to keep up. Next slide, please. Customer-owned solar installations. This is a very organic growth. Remind the commission that we basically removed all incentives back in 2022. That has had zero impact to the growth. In fact, what we saw was a higher growth rate after the incentive went away, which seems counterintuitive, but I think what it comes down to is those that can do. So if they have money, they install it, If they don't, they don't. And it really didn't have anything to do with the incentives. As you can see, what we're seeing, 22, we had 23.7 megawatts capacity, 26.3 in the fiscal year 22 to 23, and then a little over 29 for this last fiscal year. We're thinking, based on that organic growth rate, that it should be relatively easy for us to get an additional 3 megawatts capacity in this next year. Next slide, please. The energy efficiency. So this is fiscal year also. These numbers primarily come from our conservation voltage reduction program, our Wilden and O-Power programs, and a few others, but those are the prime movers on that. The numbers you see here are a combination of estimates and measured values, because a fair amount of the energy savings is, it's amorphic. It changes over time, right? Most people think that when you do energy efficiencies, you see those and they're solid. That's not the case. I think what we've seen is businesses, when they implement energy efficiency programs, they actually use more energy shortly after. And I think it's because they know that they've put this money into making improvements so they have more energy available. And also, if you think about it logically, if a business is doing well and they can afford to do these energy efficiency upgrades, they're going to continue to roll that money into the business and do better, so their loads are going to increase. This includes both business and residential, though. So we see a slight drop from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24, but our goals are focused on about 10,000 megawatt hours in 2025. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Energy efficiency demand reduction. So this is a bit amorphic. It's calculated, but again, it changes. 1.5 in fiscal year 22, that's megawatts. 1.9 in fiscal year 23, and drop down to 1.3 in 24. Not positive that there's a good reason for the drop, except that we grabbed all the low-hanging fruit.
I'd just like to say something about these charts. These are incremental, so each year this is what's added.
Yeah.
They're not cumulative. So
Right, I should have said, there was a couple of cumulative charts in the beginning. These are all in year. So on this, you have, this accumulation is primarily the wheel-down direct install program for the businesses, and then in-home upgrade program. So this covers both residential and business owned right now. Our goal is to get another 0.3 megawatts within 2025. And I think that's it for my presentation. I'm available for questions.
Any commissioners want to take a stab here?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd be surprised if you didn't.
I know. Well, I have a lot of questions, but I'll just give you one.
Thank you.
That 20% energy growth in 1 year is a staggering number. What's that due to? I mean, the growth of the housing stock, growth of EVs, growth of heat pumps, but still, 20% is a staggering number.
Right.
What do you
So
attribute that to?
We're still going through a verification process. That's an initial number. But I think electrification is playing a big role. I think electric vehicle penetration is playing a big role. I think the push for solar kind of wakes people up in the idea that, why don't I move my appliances to electric also? So there's a lot of things that are slowly being grabbed and added, but it could just be economic growth in the city also.
I mean, how does that compare to prior years? I know we get into the pandemic, so hard to really.
Right. I don't have a number drawn off my head from last year, but we will definitely come back with you and kind of go through all the details.
I mean, this is when, Manny, in the electric utility industry, we've had, load growth of like 2% historically, or 1.5%, right?
Well, a lot of times that's compared to peak. We're talking overall energy over the whole year. So again, we need to go through the process of verifying all of this. This is very preliminary. So I don't want to spook you on this growth, but that's the number that I just recently got from our power management group. So I want to make sure that we're accurate.
But we know there's no like giant AI data center that's been built in Glendale in the last year, right? So it stands to reason that this is all kind of incremental growth within homes and businesses that are here, right? Yeah, I think that's actually a sign of success for the utility as a whole, or for the city, that we've created these policies to encourage people to electrify things that previously ran on fossil fuels, and it appears they're doing it. So I think that's great.
Yes, now we just have to keep up.
And yeah, that's the term, beneficial electrification. Can be very positive, but that's a big number.
Yeah. Generally, though, we have an easier time meeting a big increase in the kilowatt hour load than the peak load,
Yes.
right? So in some ways, this is good. We're selling more electrons, but we don't have to sell them all at the same time. So we can use our existing infrastructure to a higher utilization rate.
Yeah.
If we can organize it all properly.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. But I will say that while there's a benefit in supplying the energy overall for an annual basis, we do have to size our system for worst case scenario, and we still have issues on that, the third quarter and plus a month every year.
Mr. Flanagan, anything else you wanted to add?
Oh, no, that's good for me for now. Thank you.
On the carbon-free, we saw some significant drop by like 10% from 22 to 24. And you've got projected increase of 6% in the next year. I mean, how are you going to do that? Are you going to do a rain dance or something?
No. So we're going to push. I mean, every year we're trying to do better. We're hoping that hydro is going to come back and we'll have more access to it. I know there has been some recovery in Lake Mead, so some of our Hoover contract we should reap some benefits there. But we're looking at all sorts of resources. Remember, if we can do better with our RPS, that'll roll into it also. But we're going to look at getting away from unspecified energy. It's one of the things that has a big impact on that, and especially the PCL, is not knowing the source of energy, so we have to assume that it's natural gas. And so we will work on our trades to move away from unspecified as much as possible.
Another thing that attributes that, as he said, RPS is included. So this is both the renewable and hydro and nuclear. So we have Shoal Canyon. It's a biogas project coming online sometime by the end of next year.
It's supposed to come online in June. It may slip a little, but it'll definitely be
by the
this
end
year.
of next year. So that will increase this. And that's a round-the-clock facility, approximately 10 megawatts?
It's 11 megawatts, about 10% of our load at the time that the project was put in. It'll probably be a little less than that now.
Great. On the charging ports, what level are those fast chargers or
It's 2s and 3s, both.
2s and 3s?
Yes.
Okay.
On that one, if I could we specify and have a goal for 2 and a goal for 3? Because they're really not interchangeable. So
They aren't, but admittedly, 2s are a little bit easier to install, and depending on where they're located, it's just as viable. I understand that President Fay has a particular liking for 3 as much as possible, and we do too. Our distribution system needs to be able to handle more 3 installations.
right. No, I understand. And my personal preference aside, just from a kind of management, if we're tracking KPIs, we want to make sure we're counting the apples over here and the oranges over here. And I think level 2 and level 3 are totally different fruits. So thank you.
We can peel that out.
Okay.
I can
Great
give
pun,
an
by the
update. We are working on an RFP for, as Mr. Mellon said, a third-party private ownership of these chargers, and both of them are specified. But we've had some really good information come out of one of them, kind of a European model, where the customer has their own cord, and it would reduce the amount of vandalism. It's been successful in Europe, so we're hopeful that the RFP will yield some good results and actually do more than 12, I think.
Yeah. Then I like that particular design because it's cleaner and there's less, to your point, the vandalism can be cut way down on the cables. But there's also a couple others, one where it's integrated into light posts. And you transition an existing light post to an all LED and then have a charger off of it. But that has to do with whether or not your system can handle that, different voltages. And there's the customary one, just, everyone puts stuff on the curbs. And then there's the design concept that's more like a gas station and a lounge, which I think could be appealing to people also.
The bring your own cable is great. I'm glad we're considering that. The first time I saw one, it blew my mind. It's like, this is so obviously better, especially when copper prices go up and people start stealing cords and things. So, and I agree, like the tangle of, and these cords get so filthy so fast that you don't want to touch it. So I'm glad we have some options there.
Yeah, and it also supports our multifamily community that does not have, I call them the garageless. So they can charge overnight using their own, and the facility locks the cord, so it's not easily stolen.
On
You'd
that
hope they'd
note-
have the sense not to cut into the cable when it's plugged in.
On the subject of multifamilies, do you have any thoughts on, I mean, we have a lot of people that live in multifamily
Yes.
buildings, and I think that it's going to be a challenge to get those people, charging overnight in their buildings. Do you have thoughts on how to approach that? I mean, is it level 1, level 2?
It's at least level 2, and we're not even looking at level 1s anymore. It just doesn't make any sense. I think we have to take every neighborhood as a separate. We have to address each neighborhood separately, right? We have to take a look at what resources are around, how we can get energy to the locations where we do the installations. I do like bring your own cord, that concept. Short of that, I mean, where you have high concentration of multifamily homes, the only other option is really do large-scale parking lot with chargers in that, and that can get expensive fast. So first, we'd aim for low-hanging fruit, trying to get clean-looking installations around the neighborhoods, because I think part of doing anything like this is trying to leave the neighborhood as good or better than when we got there, and kind of roll it all up. If we have available parking structures or even parking lots that are city-owned, obviously we can do installations there. And that's part of our focus right now, solar and looking at EV chargers at city-owned facilities.
As we consider an RFP, I think another category or concept to consider kind of soliciting interest from the industry would be managed charging facilities, especially at locations where you'll have many vehicles parked in the same place for long periods of time. And if the car's parked for a longer duration than it needs to be charging, it doesn't necessarily need to start charging as soon as it gets plugged in. You could think about an airport. If you're going to go on a trip and you're going to be gone for 3 days, you don't really care if your car charges as soon as you park, as long as it's ready before you get back, right? And I think there's a similar kind of dynamic when people are at home asleep. Their car's probably parked for 10 hours. It may only need to charge for 2 or 3 hours. And managed charging could help us eliminate that kind of worst case scenario peak that would overload the infrastructure at a particular building or feeder or something like that. So that might be something we should consider as well.
Sure. Well, that's taking to be blunt, that's taking the smart charger to the ultra smart charger level, right? It has more to do with the charging systems that would manage a large group of electric vehicle chargers.
Yeah, it's something that's more common in fleets where one owner owns multiple vehicles. We see it in transit systems where you have, 50, 100 transit electric buses that are all plugged in at the same time at the same location. You could do the same thing on a community scale, something to consider.
Question, you said that you're not even looking at level 1 at this point. And to Alex's point, where somebody's plugging in for 10 hours, I know level 1 is very slow, but I would imagine that for most people, if they plug in when they get home, that they, even at a level 1, their car's going to charge more overnight than their average miles driven in a day. And I'm just wondering why, with the, why you're not looking at level 1.
It's really cost. The dollars it takes to install a level 2 is very similar to the cost to install a level 1. And
Really?
well, yeah, at this point, yes, because if you're talking about an individual charger, a stand that's going to be publicly accessible, physically everything is about the same between a 1 and 2. It's the innards that are different, right? So your inverter is the only thing that's different. That's the difference of the type of copper or the connection between, right? The labor, the installation cost, running cable to it to have that work, all about the same. It's gotten to that kind of point. So if we're talking level 1 and you want it in your house, you don't need a charger at all. All you need is an extension cord and an interface to your car.
That's kind of my point, is if we're going to go, if you've got an apartment building and you want to provide charging for half a dozen customers, all you got to do is extend the outlets, the 120s.
Right.
And it's, all the cars come with a 120 charger. I think with Tesla, you've got to pay for it now or whatever. But, it goes in line with the bring your own cord. You've got it in the back of your car, and all you got to do is plug into the outlet. And, most people drive, average 25, 30 miles a day at the most. You're going to get that overnight. And when you look at the amount of, on your typical circuit, if you put in a 240 charger, you can put in about 4 or 5 120 outlets and charge 4 or 5 cars, as opposed to the 240. And I'm just thinking that maybe the level 1 would work for a lot of people.
I don't disagree. Level 1 would work for a lot of people. If everyone is, so say you have a 20-room apartment building and you have a parking structure underneath and everyone's parking there. I agree. Everyone could plug into an outlet in their parking spot. That wouldn't require anything from the utility. Right? That would be anyone who built it could just put an outlet there and plug it in. If we're talking level 2 for that facility, similar, but a larger distribution panel in order for that same building. If we're talking generally accessible by the public, that's a very different animal.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking that with all the people that we have in the multifamily, that we're going to have to do something to jumpstart this.
Yeah, I happen to live in a community that uses a lot of golf carts. It's been there for 60 years, but they built it with the anticipation to use golf carts, and in every carport there's a 110 outlet. That is morphed into electric vehicle level 1 charging. And the community does it. I think you pay $150 a year and you get to charge. So I think that model is a good one for multifamily, but I don't think it's something that the utility is focused on. I think we do want more level 3 and we want level 2. So the level 2 concept with bring your own cord curbside is for a customer that their building is close, they can park and charge overnight. Level 3 is more if you need a 20-minute pickup and you get, 50 miles for 20 minutes. That's how we're supporting it. There's a lot of infrastructure with communication and billing and things like that really wouldn't work for the utility to do level 1. I think it's for the amount of money. In fact, we're trying to get out of the business. We're trying to entice private operators to come in here, and their business model is more along the lines of what I described, more like the gas station level 3 or the overnight charging level 2. But your points are well taken, and I think the solution for multifamily owners can be level 1. And I think it's exactly what you said. You get 30 miles overnight, and it's
I think
probably a lot
even
for-
though
yeah.
it may not involve the utility or affect the utility, I think our citizens are looking to the utility for the best information. And I think that this is something that, you know, that people should know about, that this is an option. And, you know, if you're not commuting to Orange County and back every day, you may be fine with level 1.
And even if our role as utility is not to build and operate those level ones, you know, we do have a monopoly on providing energy here. So we definitely are involved, and this is definitely part of our load growth. And it's good off-peak load to have cars charging at night. Yeah. We're selling electrons when we have extra capacity. So it seems like something we ought to encourage, but I can understand that it's not really a brick and mortar project the way we traditionally think about them. So maybe it's more of an outreach project to work with commercial apartment owners to help them understand this is something you could offer to your tenants, or, you know, I don't know how we would go about it. I think it is a very different project than building level 2 and level 3 chargers at parking lots and in public streets, but it may solve or help us solve the same problem and reduce the demand on those public chargers if more apartment dwellers can just plug in at home.
Yes, and I do think, trying to remember, I do think we have some codes that have been initiated that are focused on, you know, reaching that electrification goal. I think they've been softened a little bit recently, but essentially there's a desire to move builders in that direction. If you're going to build a new facility, this is the kind of stuff we're looking for. So new facilities kind of has that build out in mind. Older facilities, right, they may need some convincing.
So maybe we could ask for your team to think about ideas or programs we could offer to help convert older apartment buildings essentially to achieve a similar level of access to level 1 charging that would be required in a new building or something like that.
Sure.
Thank you. Would that address your questions? Great.
Yeah, it's probably important to note that, you know, from the utilities perspective, we're looking at packetizing, I'll use that keyword, packetizing any installs that we do in the streets and for general public use, because we're looking to get more functionality out of it than the common individual, right? If we put public charging and out there and we have access to it, well, that'll be one of the things that we use first if we ever get into a situation where we have to shed load. The first thing we would likely shed is the chargers. Obviously, we don't want to shed energy to people's home where they live if we can shed energy that's being consumed by people that don't necessarily have to go anywhere right now. So we're asking a lot more from any charger installations that we do publicly than what people would do if they were just installing it at their apartment house or anything else.
And maybe that's something we ought to consider extending into people's garages and apartments is, you know, GWP will help you cover the cost of doing this if you're willing to let us shut it off on that, you know, 0.1% of the time when we really need the energy or something like that.
Sure.
I mean, I'd take that deal. So.
I just had one more question. On your comment on the solar, you said when you took away the incentives that the participation as far as adding solar stayed the same. I wonder if you compare that to other utilities in the same period of time that did have incentives. Because and the reason I ask that is because the cost of solar has been coming down, and I'm just thinking that it's possible, had you continued with the incentives, that the numbers would have gone up.
So you said a couple of interesting things there. One is the cost of solar is coming down. It may be coming down for those people who are leasing systems and installing them on their houses. But I can tell you that the cost of solar has not come down for us in doing installations in utility scale. In fact, that's kind of the point I made, is that suppliers are constantly trying to renegotiate as they move forward. So I think that's a common misconception, and it's not for lack of penetration. There's a lot of solar companies trying to get out there. I think what it has to do with is a lot of ambiguity about where the solar cells are coming from, how we're tracking that, and, you know, federal statutes and in some cases statewide statutes. So it's not. I'm not seeing that price lowering on a large scale. But again, if you're leasing, there's incentive for companies who are providing leased panels on their home to make the money up somehow. So I would assume there might be some drop. Sorry, what was the first thing you said? That was the last thing you said.
Well, my overall question was, did you compare
Oh, yes.
the participation levels?
I can't say that we did right off the top of my head. I'd have to look at everything, but no, I don't think we did. I think we were looking at the nature of this, and we were kind of surprised by the fact that it not only stayed, but it actually crept up. The rate of adoption actually increased even after that. So it may have been just, initially there were some things that were going on before we did rate increases, but it is possible that our rate increases incentivize people to install solar also.
I just made the comment that solar's been coming down because I've heard the panel prices have continued to drop, and in my personal situation, I've priced a few times solar over the last few years, and I've gotten the best prices recently that I've ever seen. So that's where my comment comes from.
Pull that trigger.
I did. And I will say also, I was very, very impressed with how fast I got the permit, because I've been hearing nightmares about it's going to take 6 months and everything, and got it right away.
Yeah, we did a lot of work in making that happen. Kudos to Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Scorza.
Just on the same topic of customer-owned solar, I think that we might want to consider a more aggressive goal for a couple of reasons. Another potential explanation for the continued increase, despite our not having the incentive, is that the federal incentives got better recently. You know, they were declining, I think, down to 26%, 22%, and then up to 30% in the and it's bipartisan infrastructure law, I think, or one of the big legislative packages. That's set to continue, although we never know what's going to happen in Washington. But
Right.
Current law, that will continue for another 8 or 9 years. And as our electric bills, our rates go up, and I think our customers see and feel that on a lag, because the billing cycle is what it is every 2 months. Not everyone checks their household finances that closely every month. Maybe you look at it at the end of the year and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm spending way more on electricity, right?
Right.
I think that will be a natural driver towards more adoption. So, you know, I think we might want to consider a higher goal. And why does it matter, right? If we have to size our number of permit reviewers or you know, people involved in implementing these systems and ensuring customers have that good experience, we may need to anticipate and staff for a higher volume than we've traditionally seen.
Well, it's highly likely we'll be coming back to talk to Commission about staffing in the future.
Good.
Can I just add on to that I'd like to see a goal for solar plus storage installations, because while we've gotten rid of our incentives for solar, I could see us instituting incentives for storage that would be beneficial to the utility as well.
Sure, Commissioner Flanagan's aware of the E3 study and the outcome of that. The pricing on that is pretty significant for storage adoption. It's so much so that most people aren't interested in doing it, but we could talk about that.
I would guess that after the last couple of weeks, there's probably more people that are interested than were before. You know?
Quite possible.
So, you know, as rates go up and, you know, people have this in their memories, maybe it's worth for some people.
So to that point, it wouldn't require any incentive on the utilities part in order for them to pull that trigger.
Sure.
That's true.
Any other questions for Mr. Mellon?
I had one question. If we can go back to slide 14, our percentage, if you look at it in the sense of percentage, it looks lower, but obviously you indicated that that's because the demand is so much higher. So maybe it would be beneficial for future slides to put what actual megawatt hour of carbon-free energy we purchased, because if you put that next to it, you're going to see a bar that's going up. Even though the percentage dropped from 55 to 49, 6%, if the demand rose by 20%, the amount of carbon-free energy we bought just is more than last year.
That's a good point.
So maybe it would be beneficial so that people understand, because if it's getting harder, there's more demand to Glendale, there's more demand to other utilities. Everybody's driving Teslas and what have you. So everybody's going to start competing to get those the carbon-free energy that they can buy as soon as possible. And I see that number keep going down unless we kind of explain what's happening. And I think a chart of how much in megawatt hours of carbon-free power we bought each year, that bar is going to keep going up, I think. So that would be beneficial to our customers or whoever's looking at that chart for the future.
That's a very good point, and I think we will do that, yes.
Last one I'll mention on the demand reduction slide, number 18. The goal of 0.3 megawatts is significantly less than what we've accomplished in the last few years. I know that the programs we set out didn't really fulfill their vision. The thermostats weren't yielding as much as we thought, but since our peak load really seems to be, one of the top 2 or 3 critical issues that this department faces, that 8-hour period on that hot summer day, this seems like it ought to get more attention or be a bigger stretch goal. And I don't know if there's just not anything else to go after, or we haven't funded it, or what the issue is, but I wonder if you could kind of address that and how you see this within the ranking of priorities.
Sure. So it will be interesting because the 1.3 number occurred, obviously, because it's fiscal year before we actually had our system peak this last year, right? So we had our system peak in, I want to say July, or a new system peak, 350-ish. So you have a good point. I think we picked a megawatt growth that we kind of saw we could attain, and our concern is the response. We spent, the last number I saw was $3.2 million to get 2.6 megawatts worth of response, and only in the best case scenario saw 1.6 megawatt response. And that was demand response. That's a lot of money to spend for that little of a response.
Can you help me with the math? How does that price per megawatt compare to what we were paying, or megawatt hour compared to what we were paying during that peak period of purchased energy when the whole state of California is trying to buy?
See, that's an interesting point, but it's a trap, because if you're just talking about what we paid for that little bit of energy during that peak period, it doesn't come anywhere close to what we paid for the total amount of energy over a year, right? So it's an interesting point, but I don't think it really grasps the big concern.
Well, I think that for me, I think the energy efficiency label here is kind of a misnomer, and maybe this ought to be categorized differently. I think this is like peak load reduction is what this should be serving, right? So we don't really care about the rest of the year. We want that one day, or shaving, if we can shave a little bit off our top 3 worst peaks or something like that. Right. And I think maybe if we think about this program with a different lens, that it's really about avoiding firing up Grayson for 1 extra hour a year, or avoiding buying, paying through the nose for purchase energy, for 6 hours a year. How much is that worth? And, can we set up a program that's kind of geared so that it's in our interest? We're saving money by doing it, and we're achieving our goals.
True. Those are very interesting points, and they are valid points, but those are pretty small compared to the cost of having to build a system that can accommodate that peak condition. Because remember, we design our systems to accommodate the worst case scenarios.
So you're saying maybe it's just more cost effective to pull a little extra electricity out of the batteries at Grayson than crank everyone's thermostat down a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, at least try and keep things down, but what we don't want to do is, if we don't have to build a system to accommodate that peak, if we can find a way around doing that, it has a very broader impact, right? Mm-hmm. So in order to reduce that peak, we want to reduce that peak, how do I say this, more like permanently, right? Adjusting for possibilities, it's great, right? But if that energy need is actually there, we still have to build the system to accommodate it, right? So a lot of the money that we have to build in the system, a lot of the money that we have to spend is in building and maintaining that system to meet that peak. If we can do something that actually removes that peak permanently, then we don't have to put the money into continuing to grow the system. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I approach it. I mean, yes, every day when we look at the worst day of the last, in July, the highest peak, and we see what's going on in that system, it's like, God, I could just do this. I could just do this little tweak here or here. Mm-hmm. that's great. It's a real day, real time, real experience event, and you want to deal with it. But it's not as cost effective or long term as attempting to manage that need for growth.
Thank you. All right, I think that concludes our questions for this one. So next is the Electric Services Division. Is that right?
Thank you.
Yes. This is our Assistant Manager, Dan Scorza.
Hi, Dan Scorza here. Commissioners, thank you for having us and asking and giving you this presentation. I'm going to start with my organization here, just to give you just a brief description of what each organization part does here. The Electric System Engineering, they do the planning and building for the future, the expansion. They look at SCADA, they look at the protective relays, and what we need to do in the future to meet future needs, such as, what are our new peaks? So as we electrify, our engineering team looks at the system that we have. The next organization is Customer System Expansion. That's our service planning group. They're the ones that deal with the electrification and new customers. They take care of all those needs. They're the ones that would have worked with our permitting division to streamline solar installations, as we discussed before. The other group I have is the GIS mapping and records. As you know, there's a lot of infrastructure that we have in the utility. The records of our system are kept in our GIS system and our customer information as well. So it's an important group that keeps both also for water and electric infrastructure. The other group is project management. Currently we have the Shoal Biogas project that we're managing. We also support the Grayson Repowering project. We do the substation upgrades and some of the 4 to 12 kV conversion. The other group is system operation. These are the guys that and gals that work with our dispatch center that look at our system 24/7. And I don't know if you know, we have about 105 feeders, 12 substations, and these are monitored 24/7. Also, these guys in system operation take the calls at night. They would call out our trouble guys who work in the maintenance and construction. So moving to the maintenance and construction section, these are this is the organization that has the poles, the transformers, underground cable, vaults, substations, and customer facilities. They also have the 24/7 trouble guys that are working at night in case there's outages at night. These are the divisions that worked very hard as we did our restoration through the last windstorm period.
I'd just like to say something real quickly to tie power and electric together. We talk about peak load. You need a power plant to serve the energy, but you also need space, capacity in the wires and transformers to get it to the customers. So, and they both have maybe non-coincidence. Some customers peak at a different time than the power plant or the power system would peak. So there's kind of a connection there. And in electric services, they have to build out the electric system to serve all the customers that we think may be coincidentally using the power at the same time. So a little bit planning exercise.
That's right. Thank you, Manny. Let's go to the first slide. This talks about the frequency of customer outages per year. Right now, we're trending correctly. Although, we want 0 outages, right now we're trending towards 1 outage per year per customer. A lot of the outages occurred in the last 2 years, 23 and 24. It also had to do with the heat waves that we've had, where we had transformer failures and some equipment failures associated with that. They were the main cause for the increases. Let's go on to the next slide. The duration, again, the duration is going up, hopefully, as we're working and replacing our equipment. This will go down, and it's not hopeful. It's as we replace our equipment, it won't fail the second time. What happens here, a lot of this was due to the heat wave. As we replace our equipment that became damaged and maybe overloaded, and as it aged, right now it's being replaced. So my expectation is that the amount of time customers would be out will be lessened over the next few years. Our goal is always to reduce it to zero, but it's always very difficult to get that. Streetlight conversions, we've converted over the years. We're at 66%. As a note, we have about 12,000 12,000 street lights, and 66% of them are LEDs. We're also projecting by next 8 to 10 years to have converted everything to LEDs. Next one is our 4 to 12 kV conversion. I said we have about 100 or so. So each percent is 1 feeder. So you can get an idea of how many feeders we've converted and actually reconstructed as well. Reconstruction is that we prepare the feeder to go to 12 kV, but we still keep it at the low voltage until we make the changes in the substation to allow it to go to the higher voltage. So that's why there's a distinction there. So when we do converted and restructured for 12 kV, it takes time. But right now, we're projecting by 2033 that we should have converted all our overhead feeders to 12 kV. Again, at 12 kV, what happens is that we can take much higher loads, and that's our goal with electrification, to be prepared for the future. Our new and upgraded customers, they're coming to us. The increases that you see are mainly due to electrification rules that we had in Glendale and people wanting to go all electric. So we had a huge increase here. And again, it may not be the big number because this does not distinguish between, say, a 30 unit building, a 500 unit building. These are per permits that we're working with. So the increases may have huge customers in there, although the number may not seem as large.
Dan?
Yes.
ADUs too.
Oh yeah, ADUs as well, as people put in second dwelling units in their properties. So these are the service planners, and they've become very efficient because the numbers have increased greatly, and we're able to keep up with the permits that we're getting. And that's it. If you have questions, I'm glad to answer them.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions from commissioners? Go ahead.
Quick question on the 12,000 volt lines. Manny, when Manny was talking about the 2 lines that are, at the top, and if something falls across both of them, there's a circuit breaker of some sort that
Sure.
shuts them off. What happens? Are trees able to fall on these? I mean, if a whole tree like we saw.
Yeah. Yes. So in some instances, what we have is trees that are adjacent. As we do our vegetation management, we cut back 10, 12 feet from the overhead lines at the high voltage. But if a tree is higher than the pole line, if it falls, it'll fall into the line. That's what happened in this last windstorm. A lot of the damage that we sustained was because of that.
As I said, on a preventative basis, we clear lines, depending on the tree, 2 to 10 feet. But as you can see, sometimes the trees knock over our pole, or, there are other issues, right, Dan?
Yes.
We have, so it's not necessarily, but if you have palm fronds are culprits, because the palm tree's way up there, and the palm frond will release, and it'll
All on both wires.
boom, it'll
Yeah.
take it out, but then the palm frond will go on the ground, and then, so that's when we have the auto recloser. In normal conditions, it'll reclose, and the customer will be back within 10 seconds. In fire conditions, we don't do that, but,
Right.
so it just depends. So we have people hitting poles, trees knocking poles over, we have things, mylar balloons and tree branches falling on the poles, but as a preventative thing, we clear the trees. We have West Coast Arborists, a contractor, they're charged every year. It's like painting the San Francisco Bridge. They
Start over.
every year they'd start over and they trim around the high voltage line.
What if the tree falls on one of the two lines? What happens at that point?
Well, depending on the tree and its state, it may conduct to ground. So the line will feel it. At 12 kV, it will sense that there's something resting on it, and trees do conduct.
So you either need it across the two or to ground. So if you see a bird up there,
It's
the
an-
bird's charged up, but he's not electrocuted until he puts his wings across both of them.
That's a big bird. But if the tree is sitting on the one line, is it possible for that tree to become electrified, touch the tree and get blasted?
Yeah, there's always a danger. So if you see something like that, it's best to call 911 and say there is a issue. There's a tree touching the high side line. Sometimes what we get calls is the secondary lines, as Manny was explaining, which are insulated. Those are meant to be touched, or they go through trees. They're designed not to have issues when they're insulated. But the top voltage, they're not.
Nothing is perfect, but our protection does have either face-to-face, line-to-line, or face-to-ground. So it's very sensitive, and it would likely de-energize the line if we did have a tree that was conducting to ground.
Okay. My other questions are on the street lights.
Mm-hmm.
What color temperature do we install in our streets?
I have to look. It depends. We can set the intensity and also the color. So I have to see what the standards are. I don't have them with me, but it's also, it has to do with the traffic region, the amount of lighting that we have to have in the street. Some of it is related to the traffic requirements with our public works. We just make sure that the lighting is correct. In some neighborhoods, we get folks calling in saying my streets are dark, or we need some extra lighting to make the area safe. And depending with that, we'll work with the homeowner to make sure that the lighting that we put in will kind of satisfy them. There's been instances where we've installed lights and we've been asked to review them, and we will adjust them as needed. And we also have barriers that we put in, because depending on the light we put, it may shine into somebody's window or area that they don't want the light in. So we do adjust them. I don't have the information on the color exactly now with me, but we do have standards that we put in. And again, what we're looking for is the reduction of energy use. And also, we do make sure that we meet the requirements of the neighborhood if there's something shining somewhere else.
I will send the color to the commission via email.
Okay. It seems like your timeline to get the rest done, I mean, you've got 66% done now, and you've got another 10 years to get the rest. Are you just changing them as they burn out, or is there a program that you're going through and changing?
So in general, we're changing about 500 per year. So if you do the math, I think we will be there in 8 years. But depending on how much we get done as we expand streetlights, that's why we kind of put the 10-year mark in there. But it's been about 500 lights, LEDs, converted. so per year.
My question is, are you just, the ones that are being installed, are they just being installed when somebody has a burned out one? Or do you have a program that you're going street by street and installing them?
Well, part of it is as they fail, as they age. We have customers who who tell us they want the old one. In some places where we do have them, we will do that for them. But as they fail, they get converted to LEDs, and it's in the order of 500 per year. And that's generally that's how we're changing it. Originally, when we started years before I came here. We did have a program that we would change it systematically, but eventually it came to the part where, as we're changing it, 500 is about where we're at with the current staff and resources we have.
Okay. Are they dark skies approved? I assume that they are.
Well, it depends if they're pointing down, right? Not all street lights are that way. We got some of the
Oh, you have
ornamental
some of the
ones.
acorns?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And we also maintain them. We just had a item with the city council where we're going to be painting some of the ornamental street lights as they age. Unfortunately, they may have some lead paint in them, and so we have to hire a specialized contractor to do that. And neighborhoods like the old style of street light, so just depends on the neighborhood.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just have a couple process notes about the kind of the KPIs. I think the work program is great. On the frequency and duration of outages, both of those I think would benefit from having a more specific goal. I think we all agree having 0 outages is great, but is that realistic, and is that something we can kind of manage against? So one question I have is there a way, or is there an industry method to classify an outage as kind of preventable or non-preventable? Like obviously what happened the last couple weeks, that's going to throw off our numbers, right? Not much we can do about that. But to the extent there are things that are, preventable, like maintaining transformers or, replacing old poles, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those seem like things within our control that we ought to be able to manage and kind of hold ourselves accountable to. I'm wondering how you guys think about that.
Commissioner Fay, some of the things that we do are along those lines. The inspections that we do, we're going through our 5-year inspection program. We identify the poles that need replacement. We also look at overloads on our transformers. We have models of our system. So we do the preventative stuff ahead of time. But unfortunately, some of the heat waves we have, the storms, animals get in it, the palm fronds, those are causes, the balloons, the Mylar balloons, they get into the system and, damage a transformer or conductors or a switch. So we do use the preventive maintenance and program ahead, but sometimes it does, we can't get ahead of the
Sure.
numbers. We do try to be in the first quartile. That's the goal with our peers. But I think it just depends. We have a little more vegetation in Glendale. We have more trees and stuff.
And what you said was more along the lines of benchmarking.
Mm-hmm.
So in this exercise, first time we're doing it, we compared ourselves to ourselves, see what our trends are. But I think it's appropriate next time bring in benchmarking, especially with these two. These are common statistics. You see the acronym there. It's the average. The A stands for average frequency of interruptions. And then we have, through SCAPA, similar to the rate comparison, there's a comparison of not only local utilities, but also nationwide. And that's the quartile that he was talking about. So a good goal possibly would be in the top quartile nationwide.
Yeah.
And I think next time we can adjust the goal to meet that, or to at least compare ourselves.
Yeah, I think that would be good, so that there is like a numerical target. We can say, did we achieve the first quartile results or not? And if not, there's probably a good explanation, and we'll talk about it, right? The other thing I wonder here is, a lot of this stuff is outside of our control, so maybe we should also be measuring things that are within our control, the number of pole replacements, the number of, the average age of transformers, so maybe you can think about some metrics like that that are entirely within, your responsibility, that, we could do everything right and there's still a lot of outages because of wind events and things like that. So I think just from a management perspective, that would be useful to kind of see a focus on things we can control.
And that's good. Yeah, we could bring that on our next presentations.
Okay. And then on the kind of longer range projects, the streetlight conversion and the electric system upgrade, both the goals listed here are pretty long range. And then you mentioned 500 a year for streetlights. I'm wondering if there's a similar kind of more incremental or granular goal for the 12 kV upgrade, and just kind of think of it more on like a 1 year time scale, because I think the idea is we want to try to make this the first of a repeating cadence of kind of performance management stuff, and I think having the ability to check in each year would be really helpful.
Yeah, and in general, I can tell you that normally we planned for 4 conversions per year. We're around 5 or 6, so we're actually ahead of our target. Unfortunately, our contract has to be renewed, so there's a lull now, but we'll be bringing back our contractor. We'll see who it is because we're going to go out for bid. But again, our goal would be 4 conversions per year.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Also, can you go one more, please? The other way. I can add a little context to this, the orange versus the blue. So the orange are waiting for a transformer. So they've done the work in the field, they've changed the insulators, and they've changed the cross arms. But we have a long lead time on the transformers in the station. So it's 12 kV construction, but it's still 4 kV because of the transformer. So I think we may accelerate the program by renewing our contract, and our staff kind of works on maintenance and small construction projects. This is a one that is suited for a contractor to come in and do the conversion, and also order some transformers to get the lead time going in the transformers.
That's right. One of the things that happens that's not on here, the actual transformer that we have on the poles have a switch. You can switch them from 4 to 12 kV, so we do put that up. What it also gives us when we do the conversion, and not the reconstruction, but the conversion, is that the poles are new, the cross arms are new, insulators are new, all that equipment's new. So whatever is put into that neighborhood is a lot more reliable. During this windstorm, the converted pole lines did very well. There were no outages or damage to the poles due to the wind event. So it does help.
Excellent, excellent. And then on the new or upgraded electric customers, I wonder if we could come up with another goal that's more numerical, if it's possible to kind of anticipate what the demand will be. It seems like in the last couple of years there's been a big growth, probably related to electric vehicle charging and electrification, as you said. That's something we probably expect will continue. So is it possible to kind of draw a line in the sand and say for 25 we want to do at least 1,500 or something like that? Or are we really being more responsive to the demand from the community? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so it is dependent on the community coming and telling us they have these projects, because the ones here is the actual permits to actually build. There's probably a lot more that have not gone through the final process. Mm-hmm. It just depends on what projects are coming up.
So if we're responding to that demand from the community, maybe a better metric for holding ourselves accountable is not the total number, because we can't really control that. It's, how quickly do we respond to them, or how effectively do we, fulfill the customer's request? Do you think maybe that's another way we could look at this, completing plan checks on average in a certain time period, or, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so we do track that, but the number is set forth by the permit section. They give us a certain time, and these are the projects that we met on time as given to us by the permits. So before, we were struggling because we didn't have all the staff and the training in place, and we changed our system to our new InterGov, which is our online permitting system. So in the last 2 years, staff has mastered that and has become more efficient in finishing the permits. So these are actual permits done by GWP so that the customer can actually build their system.
But along the lines of performance, we could take a look at number of days to issue, or something that
Maybe
would indicate
the
our
number permits reviewed per plan checker, or the average time to complete, or the percentage that were completed within a certain
We'll take a
time
look at that.
commitment. I think some kind of service level performance, I think, would be a more useful metric for us to just make sure we're fulfilling our obligations to the community.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Right. And that's everything I had. Anything else for Mr. Scorza? Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Now we have our water systems division, and it's Mr. Obaldu,
Yeah.
Chisholm.
Good evening, members of the commission, President Fay, Chisholm Abigolu, Assistant GM of Water. So today I want to break down water into 4 distinct sections. Number 1, we have our water engineering section, and this is really our planning section. So they are responsible for the planning of our water resources and our water infrastructure, and also new developments. And then secondly, we have water operations. This is the actual production and the treatment of water. We have 2 treatment plants here in the city, 1 recycled water treatment facility, and that's the one we share with LADWP. So we plan for this water, we produce this water, and then we have our water distribution section. They are responsible for moving this water to our businesses and our residences. We have about 400 miles of pipeline in which we use to move and mobilize this water. We also have about 28 pump stations and reservoirs. You may have seen these sporadically located throughout our foothills. These are tanks that we actually use to store the water. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we have our water quality section, which ties everything, together. We have to ensure that we meet our mission of providing a reliable, safe, clean water to our residents. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and jump into it. Naturally, I would like to start with the water production. This chart shows how much water we've produced over the course of the past 3 years. As you can see, majority of our water, as represented by the blue segment, is made of imported water. So that's about 65% of our water supply. The remaining 35% or so is made up of local groundwater and to a smaller extent, recycled water. And really our goal is to reduce our reliance on imported water. I've talked extensively about the challenges and vulnerabilities associated with imported water supplies. These include these extreme variabilities that we are experiencing in our climate change, as well as just the potential for certain calamities such as earthquake, which can completely nullify our imported water supplies. And so that really is the impetus for the Recycled Water Master Plan, which was approved by Council last month, actually. And so we look forward to having that kickoff meeting any day now. As you see, our goal is not numeric, but as we continue on that Recycled Water Master Plan, we will have a more definitive or a more specific goal associated with this reduction in imported water. Next slide, please.
Chisholm, before you move on, can you go back one? You'll notice we are using less water per year. Do you have a comment on that?
Sure. I will say we have certainly reduced our water use despite an increase in population. And that really is a testament to the mindfulness of our community and how we utilize water to use water more efficiently. But that's also can be attributed to the fact that a lot of our appliances are becoming more and more water efficient. So our toilets, our dishwashers, our shower heads and things of that nature. And so we expect to continue to see this decrease as we progress. Okay, so moving on, I want to talk a little bit about our main breaks. I always say pipelines are truly the backbone of our water system. They touch every aspect of our water system, from our pump stations to our reservoirs, our wells. And so they are truly a measure of the strength and integrity of our water system. Majority of our pipe were installed in the 50s, so they are well over 80 years old, and they are approaching their useful life. However, we have managed to maintain these pipelines. Our goal is to have no more than 20 main breaks per year, and 20 is a number that we feel will allow us to systematically and proactively maintain our water line infrastructure, but also help us reduce our main breaks and plan. These numbers are informed by the Water Master Plan. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Oh, thank you. This chart will give you a flavor of how we actually compare to other water utilities within our region. In the water industry, we track main breaks by what we call main breaks per 100 miles of pipeline. And this just allows us to establish some level of consistency and benchmarking across various utilities in the industry. And so as you can see, for Glendale, we have about 2.5 main breaks per 100 miles of pipe. And again, this is well within our goal of 5 main breaks per 100 miles of pipe, or 20 main breaks per the entire year. And this is well below the national average of 14 main breaks per 100 miles of pipe. Next slide, please. And so along those lines, we have a robust pipeline replacement program. And again, this program is informed by the Water Master Plan. We replaced 1.87 miles and 1.36 miles in 2022 and 2023, respectively. However, in 2024, our primary focus was on the design of the Chilton-Kenneth Pipeline Replacement Program, and this is slated to replace about 2.2 miles of pipeline within that vicinity. And we actually had the kickoff meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we expect to start construction on that this spring. So moving on to our valves, we have an extensive valve system in our distribution system. Valves are used to isolate or shut down certain sections of our water distribution system so that we can perform maintenance work as needed. And so exercising our valves simply just ensures that they're operable when we do need them. Our goal is to exercise each valve once every 3 years. And so we have a total of about 10,500 valves. And so that equates to about 3,500 valves per year. And so for the past several years, we have not been able to meet this goal. That is primarily due to the lack of personnel resources. However, we have since and continue to staff and fill our vacancies and bring on additional operators. And so we look to continue to improve in this effort so that we can continue to meet these goals and pay attention to our valves through a comprehensive valve exercising program. And then again, lastly, but certainly not least, I would say water quality is one of the most important functions in our division. We collect and test thousands of water samples every single year to ensure that we meet all of the required regulations per the state and the feds. And this is something that's presented to your council every year as part of the CCR or the Consumer Confidence Report. And so we also monitor not only existing contaminants, but emerging contaminants, as well as, we have to be mindful of external variances such as wildfires, in which we just experienced. But I'm proud to say that we were able to meet and continue to meet all of our required water regulations within the past several years and before that.
I want to say something. There are new statutory requirements that we're dealing with. So it looks like, oh, easy, you met. But there are challenges, and it is quite an accomplishment to meet all the state and federal. I don't know if you have a few words about PFAS and lead, or. Yeah,
certainly. So, we talked about emerging contaminants, and so we are involved in a number of studies with Metropolitan Water District to monitor and test these emerging contaminants. As mentioned, one of them is PFAS. PFAS, they're known as forever chemicals, and these are once they get into your water or into the environment, it's very hard to abate these chemicals. And so we are continuously working with the state to understand and test for these PFAS within our water system and plan accordingly, whether that is through being able to mix with different sources of water so that we can eliminate some of these PFAS that we tend to notice in our water systems, but also test for these PFAS in our water systems. So that is something that we are actively working on.
Great, thank you very much. Questions for regarding the water presentation? Okay, go ahead, Roland.
I don't have a question, but a lot of attention went to electricity, but nothing's going to you.
Actually,
Not because it's not important. I think just from the sci-fi perspective, water is life. So thank you for your service.
thank you. I appreciate that. I'd like you to say, if you could, a few words about our availability to serve the fire department and our reliability in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Commissioner, for those comments. And I want to really just roll that off to our team. We have an amazing team of operators, engineers, scientists, water quality analysts that really stepped up these past couple of weeks to provide aid and assistance to our public safety, meaning fire, to be able to ensure that we have adequate water when needed. And this is something that, again, we're very proud of, to ensure that we can step up when needed to serve our communities. So thank you.
I've got a couple questions on the KPIs. Regarding the water main breaks, it seems like we've been doing much better than our goal recently, 20 breaks a year, and we've had 14 or 10. Maybe we should have a more aggressive goal. It seems like maybe we're kind of sandbagging a little bit. Would you feel comfortable committing to a goal that's more in line with recent performance, or do you think we've had an aberration in the last few years? What are your thoughts about that?
Correct. And so my response to that is that will be informed by the water master plan that we're actually getting ready to embark on. That will identify our needs, again, and sort of a roadmap of what we need to focus on and what that sweet line is, what that balance is in terms of being able to have a goal that we can continue to work towards. So to answer your question, I do think that goal of 20 main breaks per year will be modified once we complete the master plan.
Okay, great.
I noticed on the chart, Fullerton and LADWP are like way up there on the breaks. Is that just because they got old pipes? Or?
Well, that's primarily a testament to they just have more pipelines than we do. LADWP, for a matter of fact, they have 7,340 miles of pipeline. But Fullerton, that could be due to any number of factors.
They're at like 2019 and 23, and
right.
We're at 2.5.
Right. So when you think about main breaks and the causes of main breaks, that could be due to the composition or the characteristics of the soil. So potentially, if they have a more aggressive soil there, that can expedite the deterioration of the pipe. It can also be due to maintenance, right? If your crews and your operators are not maintaining your infrastructure, that could do to expediting the deterioration of the pipe as well. So there's a number of reasons why that is. I'm not exactly sure.
Thank you for doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
And then on the valves exercise slide, this is one where it seems like, and you explained very well why, but we're really falling short of what the goal is, and we have a lot of ground to make up. It seems like there's a plan in place to do that. We're hiring more people. What do you think, and you don't have to answer right now, but given the pace of hiring and growing the team and getting towards the target fully staffed team, what do you think is a reasonable target for next year? We're probably not going to be doing 3,500 a year next year if we've only been doing 300, 400 each year recently. So how do we kind of build a ramp up that gets us to 3,500 a year?
Well, that is something that we would have to assess and see what is a reasonable target for us once we're fully staffed. And not only that, but is that adequate? Meaning, do we need to augment our resources with potentially contractors to help us meet this goal? And so I don't have a definitive answer for you now, but that is something that we are considering.
Okay. Yeah, and if you can take that back and think about, we'll be fully staffed in 3 years once we've hired all these positions. So maybe next year we could do 1,000, and the year after that we could do 2,000, right? I think laying that out would be helpful, and I think this is a really good example of why this exercise is important, because we need to be able to be honest about where we're not meeting our goals and where we are falling short so that we can do something about it. And if that means we ask the city council for more money, or we have to build it into the rates or something like that, at least we know and we can take action to help you guys do the great job that you're doing. So thank you for putting forth an ugly number. I know sometimes that's something you want to avoid, but I think it's important that we have these kind of candid conversations. And since we have talked about the fire department coordination, are these valves, like if a valve did not work as expected in a critical moment, that could be a very significant impact in terms of moving water for fire?
Yeah, generally speaking, there are options. We have redundancy within our system. So let's just say we're trying to isolate a certain section of the distribution system, and these two valves are inoperable. We would just go to the next valves and see. It just means we have to shut out more people, which is an inconvenience to our residents, but there are ways to accomplish that.
I see. And I would imagine, based on the design or the topology of the system, not all valves are equally critical.
Correct.
Right? So is there some prioritization of testing, like, these are the 500 most critical valves? Maybe we should test those every year, and then the other ones we test a little less frequently?
Absolutely. And so we certainly prioritize it based on size. So our larger valves, we tend to test a lot more than the smaller valves, but also based on location, meaning, the valves in which are at critical locations that may impact public safety, the valves in which we don't have redundancy, in which we have to have access to when we need. We do prioritize those.
Okay. Then I think maybe another modification here going forward would be to split that into 2 different classifications, maybe, critical valves and other valves.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all important, right? But we can choose our favorite children here when it comes to valves.
Yeah.
And I think that would be interesting to see. Maybe there's a different frequency or metric that you want to use for those critical ones, even if it comes at the expense of testing the other ones less frequently.
But we can consider that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's it for water.
Now we have Steve Nersasian. He's our Joint Support Service.
Good evening. 6 o'clock, 6:10. For the sake of time, Steve Nersasian, Assistant General Manager, Water and Power Support Services. I'll do my best to go over it as quickly as possible. Support Services is a section that it's been renamed most recently. It used to be Admin Services. It's combined of 7 different sections. Division alone is bigger than some of the city departments. We have team members of over 60 in various sections. We have safety services, we have administrative support services, we have customer services, city-wide warehouse operation, human resources, legislative affairs, environmental services. We have chosen a few sections that I'll be talking about today. The first one is, I think every section talked about it, is the recruitment, staffing, and I'll do my best to sort of talk about that. Again, for us to be the best public utility that I think we're one of the best, if not the best, reliable, trustworthy, sustainable, we have to have the best team. And being in this organization for over 30 years, I'm proud to say we're probably one of the best. We have the best team. We try to go out and recruit the best folks out there. If we need to do a national search, we do that. If we need to promote somebody within who's up and coming superstar, we do that as well. As I go over the numbers, as we all know, they're not just numbers. Every organization, what's our most important asset is our people. And these are our people that I'll be talking about. So the first number, we did 2-year comparison, is our positions. We have 325 positions in 2023. We conducted 70 recruitment processes, and we had 38 separations. The numbers are a little better in 2024. We had 327 positions. We conducted 77 recruitment processes, and we have 33 separations. And quickly, for example, the separations can mean a number of different things: retirement, getting a better job, moving to another physical location, etc. With that, before I go on to the next section, is a little bit of customer service. I also wanted to say that from our perspective, the entire utility industry is struggling. This is not a Glendale issue. This is a national issue. It's bigger than the state issue, and we're constantly in conversations. The one thing for sure for us, for our organization, I can attest to it, to Glendale Water and Power, as we try to get to the best, that's what we go after. And as you can see from the people that have come in front of you today, it's a pretty diverse group, a talented group, but in addition to that, everything we do is merit-based. We have civil service, we follow those rules. Sometimes some of the recruitments take a lot longer, cost us a lot more money because we have to go utilize outside recruiting firms, and the market is just scarce. Whether you're looking for the top engineers or you're going after the linemen, we have done a fairly good job trying to offer different mechanism to make things better, but it's a very, very competitive market. And the shortages, not only in Glendale, like I said, it's in our neighboring cities, counties, but we constantly look at different avenues, outreach mechanism, trying to go to our community resources, at least for entry-level positions, apprentice positions. So we're thinking abroad. We do have a succession plan in GWP, which is unique. We all continually look at that and find mechanism and look at do gap analysis, and we work very closely with obviously our human resources department. So the next slide is a couple of KPIs in our customer services section. So customer services section is relatively large section of the administrative services, one of the busiest sections within admin services. And one of the comparisons we have is our call performance. Our goal is we try to be at 95%. In 2023, we received 81,504 calls, and 76,109 of them were handled. In 2024, the number is slightly on the lower end, at 92%, but the volume has gone up. We received 87,921 calls, and we were able to handle 80,886 calls. Our goal is to be at a place that the customer is on hold from 4 minutes average to about 2 minutes. We are upgrading our system, but it's a system that utilized throughout the city. We have our input, we are our staff, our team members, part of that committee. We're working closely, but there's definitely things we have learned even through this emergency that we're gonna be working closely to make sure the final product is the best product that's out there. Manny came on board and he had some good ideas. He questioned some of the things. So we're looking at everything. The end product has to be the best product out there that's gonna get the best results in a timely manner. Next one is our web contact. Again, from 2023 to 2024, this is where we see significant improvement. We have had 16,503 web contacts in 2003, and we were able to respond within 24 hours, 11,401 of them in 2024. Although the volume went up, we were able to do a much better job at 15,913. And again, just like everybody talked about, we ourselves have had staffing issues, new staff coming on board, the entire training process. So but the number is much better in 2024. And then walk-in contacts. Ultimately, with the rate increase, this certainly added the volume of people coming in person. They wanted answers, and 52,231 walk-in customers. I mean, that's a huge number. Collectively, customer services addressed almost 150,000 customers, and that's a relatively large number. So they do a fine job. Last but not least, one of the other sections I have.
Steve,
yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the new phone system and the callback feature and how we're going to get the, you want to do it now or later?
Unfortunately, it's a system we're working on. It's not finalized. It is a citywide system, but it's going to have all those features that you see in the top companies organization. We also understand our community, so a lot of things will be translated in different languages. Matter of fact, if you call today, at the best of our ability, there are definitely mechanisms that you can use and speak to folks, or automated system will direct you to get that, whether it's Spanish, Armenian. But we're limited now because the system is not finalized. Last but not least, one of my favorite sections is the safety section. I think I've taken on this section for quite 2-3 years now, and there's some exciting numbers here that I like to share. As we know, safety is not something you do reactive, it's proactive, and our numbers will indicate that. We've been running with it, we've been extremely proactive. The safety of our crews, safety of our everyday staff, including our citizens, the folks that we serve, is extremely important to us. In 2023, we had 18 incidents. 5 last days, which the cost, as you can see, is $117,257. In 2024, there's a significant shift where we only had 14 incidents, and then cost went down to $31,700. Only 3 last days of work, which is almost like a 73% reduction. And this is primarily due to what we do behind the scenes. We implement a lot of training programs. We have an outstanding utility safety officer. All of my team members are outstanding, but specifically in this particular case, we offer 70 different trainings every day. We do the tailgate meetings with the crews. We do our best in trying to help and create an environment that safety is everybody's responsibility. A last slide, a total last days, where in 2023, because of this incident, there was 1,059 last days, and now in 2024, it's 310. I know we identified the goal of reducing this by 10%. Probably be extremely challenging, but it's a goal. We'll work our butts off, try to get there. I think with that, I
just don't hurt yourself doing it.
Good point, Commissioner Fay. This concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be here to answer them. I'll be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you. And any questions from the fellow commissioners? Okay. I've got just a couple on the staffing recruitment. I'm trying to think about what would be a metric that helps us kind of assess the scale of the challenge. I mean, it's certainly articulated that this is a problem for us and for all utilities. And I know it's probably very competitive with other municipal utilities in the region that are within commuting distance and all of that. Maybe something like the number of days that a role is open before we fill it, and we could see if that's trending up or down. Right? Is it taking us longer to find the right candidates this year than last year? Or the number of positions that are unfilled at any given moment, something like that. I mean, do any of those kind of resonate with you as things we could track?
Absolutely. We'll certainly do that for the next presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. And I understand that it's kind of a hybrid function that also depends on the city of Glendale's broader HR team. Could you just explain a little bit where is the division of responsibility between your team and then where it goes to city HR?
Certainly. So there was a period of time that Glendale Water and Power had its own HR department, and we had a couple of staff members, and that made things a little easier. But at some point, I want to say maybe roughly 10 years ago, the decision was made to have one centralized HR department. So the division is such that day-to-day functionalities are that if there's a fire that we can put up in Water and Power, we put up those fires. This could be a union issue, this could be a technicality issue on processing, reallocation. But you're absolutely correct, Commissioner Fay. It is a centralized function, and they have been also hammered by staffing, so that's somewhat contributed to the delays in some of the processing. But also, if you look at our executive team. As you see, we have a temporary general manager. Also, some of our assistant general managers are fairly new. We have also gone through a lot of reorganization that also contributed to some of the delays. It's a direct oversight from us. We do our own succession planning. We take a look at our own gap analysis. And again, some of the things I mentioned, if there's truly a talent that we want to keep them in Glendale, there are different mechanisms we can do, step increases, additional step increases, anything we can encourage, we do that. Unfortunately, again, it's the scarcity of the industry. I mean, some of the high-level positions, the vacancy could go on for months and months. And some of the points you mentioned for the next presentation, I'll bring up more realistic numbers and statistics. In some cases, we go out and hire a recruiting firm, and we offer some of the unprecedented things we have not hired in the city, trying to attract them to Glendale.
Sure.
In some cases, we're successful. In some cases, we're not.
Maybe another metric, and this isn't intended to kind of point fingers at what's causing the delay, but since there are kind of two different entities here, if there's a part of the process where we're not getting the response we need from the centralized HR team, if there's a way to track, days of delay on, I don't know the process that well, but if there is something where we're not getting the level of service that we need from the city centralized HR team, that would be another important thing to elevate and make sure that we can try to resolve. If we have a big bottleneck and we have a lot of positions that are unfilled and a lot of work that's not getting done because there's another team that's designed to be supporting us, but they're not able to provide that support, then that's a bigger issue we should escalate as well.
Point well taken, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. And then on the customer service, I'm wondering if there's a way we can just try to reduce the total number of inquiries. It seems like we're kind of bailing out a ship and there's just constant calls and emails. Is there maybe a way to kind of step back from that and say, what can we do to try to reduce these, either by letting customers handle things more self-service or making things easier to understand so they don't need to call in the first place? Within my company, the way we do that is we look at like a categorization of the issues. And if we see that there's, a lot of people are calling about the same problem, maybe it's worth designing a change that just eliminates that problem in the first place. I don't know if that's something that you guys can do within your tracking of calls and issue types, or have data on that, but that might be an interesting analysis to look at, is what are the kind of, top categories that are contributing to the number of calls and which ones might we resolve through some other fix, even if it's outside of your department.
Again, another excellent point, Commissioner Fay. We are continuously looking at everything we can look at and explore different avenues. As you saw from the numbers, unfortunately, I mentioned one particular reason, rate increases. That is certainly out of the volume of the calls and walk-ins. But again, I think that one can go back to, and we can work closely with our community outreach. Some of the calls or phone calls or web inquiries can be eliminated potentially if there's a better outreach, and I'm not criticizing that particular section, but just working with them hand to hand. And if some people are better informed, whether it's through social media or any other form of notification, so we're certainly looking at everything.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think, if some people are going to call because they want to complain about the bill going up, and we're not going to be able to do anything about that. But if there was a better explanation in the bill insert that explained why, maybe someone's like, oh, this sucks, but I get it, So I think it's great that we take kind of a whole team approach to that kind of issue.
I agree with the sentiment. I just don't know, maybe a benchmark against how many calls we get versus others, because we do a lot of those things already. We have a good IVR. I would say that I've had bad IVRs as a customer. But one of the things I did when I came here, I looked at our IVR, he knows, and I looked at our website. They all know. But it's something that does, like for example, during the outages, we had a very long message saying that all of the information we have is updated real time on the website, and we have an outage map. And so we told customers how to find the information, and I think that was very helpful, probably cut down a lot of the calls. Our payment, we can do payments online, but you can do payments by phone. It's actually not that hard to do the payment by telephone. And we have our customer service manager. A lot of customers do partake in that. So we've done those things. I think a lot of the calls that are for outages, for emergency, go right to the emergency, but they don't go to our customer call center. The reason I mentioned the callback is the reason those calls aren't handled is because people get tired and they hang up. So I give the example of Delta Airlines. I was so happy to wait 4 hours because it took me like 30 seconds for it to say, okay, yeah, call me back. And then they call me back 4 hours later. I'm so happy that here I am telling them about that. Really, it's serving the customer. It's kind of like Fast Pass at Disneyland. You can manage it within, because when they called back, it's probably at their low peak time, but the customer was satisfied. The call got handled, so it goes in the green. So I think
I'm glad we're looking at models from other industries, not just within public services. I think there's a lot of other industries that have kind of figured out that customer touch point better than local government. So it's good that we're adapting to that.
So we do have the goal of that going up, and I think next year maybe we'll compare our number of calls per customer to others and see how we're doing that way.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
All right, so we took questions that kind of as we went. I think we concluded with that item. So we'll move to the next item.
Next item, agenda forecast.
You have in your packets an agenda forecast. We did diligently look at moving the regular meeting to another time that would not be conflicted with holidays. The one that looked promising was the second Monday, because there are a lot of commissions and things during the week, but there was a conflict with some of the other regular meetings. So we looked at this year and we put together a forecast based on the first Monday, and there's really only one that conflicts with the holiday, and that's Labor Day. So we would recommend leaving the regular meeting, and to the extent we need special meetings, go ahead and do that. But this is the forecast that we have before you.
Thank you for looking into that. So just to make sure I'm understanding, the blank rows on July and December, those meetings are still intended to happen. They just haven't been populated with content yet?
They're regular meetings, and we'll decide whether we need them or not. Sometimes people take vacations in summer and the winter holiday, but yeah, if to the extent, those are regular scheduled meetings. Yeah.
Okay.
And there will be no meeting on February 3rd because we're just January 22nd.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. As I alluded earlier, I think that the scale of the recent disaster and some of the finger pointing, looking for answers, questions that have come up about the role of water and electric utilities in potentially starting the fires, hindering the response. This is all very relevant to the work we do. And I think that it warrants us taking a special effort to address that. And I think we don't want to wait till it happens here to have some kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We'd like to get ahead of it. So what I would like to suggest, and I'm looking for feedback from my fellow commissioners, let's pick a date, and whether it's in March, or maybe that's too soon, we need more time, but sometime in the next 2 months or so, and have a kind of wildfire after action report. Even though it wasn't our wildfire, what are the issues that LADWP ran into in the Palisades with reservoirs being offline at a very inconvenient time and unable to supply water pressure to that many hydrants? I think it would be good for us to kind of talk through how those would have happened here. And the idea would be to find vulnerabilities or issues ahead of time. So that if we need to build a redundant valve, because there's one valve that's going to really, screw this neighborhood if it doesn't work, then we check that valve every 6 months or whatever it is, right? I think in the same approach, we chose not to take, we were thinking about the timing of Shoal Canyon and Grayson related to the summer peak season, and we delayed those projects, so we didn't have them offline during a peak. We need to think about what maintenance we're doing ahead of fire season. So things like that, some categories here I'd like us to address, and I can send some more notes and details, but really understanding the wildfire impacts at GWP. Were there staff of our utility that lost their homes or relocated? are they still out of their homes? Is there anything we can do to support them with flex time, childcare, whatever it is, so we take care of our people that are impacted. We talked a lot about the wind damage already, so I think you've covered that. To the extent we had our own wind emergency, seems like we've handled that pretty well. So I think we can probably cover that. But I think a question that came up is the design scenario that all of these systems are built for still accurate and representative of the world we're living in? Are the winds blowing faster than the worst case scenario that we designed for, right? So I think that would be worth looking at. We allude a little bit to the role of the water system in putting out fires. There are a lot of neighborhoods around Glendale that look a lot like Palisades, from the topography and terrain, and there's certainly probably some single point failures where if this water tank is not working, then these fire hydrants will lose pressure quickly. I think it would be good to understand that and identify what some of those issues are. Do we have redundant power, either circuits or generators for key pump stations? Do we have redundant pipelines connecting key facilities? And to the extent that it's helpful to have the fire department join us to share their view of how this works and what they need from our utility, I would like to invite them to join as well. And I'm sure you guys can help find the right people within the fire department to speak to that. And then revisiting the wildfire mitigation plans that we review each year, I want to make sure that we don't just kind of dismiss this and say, well, we have an annual wildfire mitigation plan. My understanding is that's kind of a regulatory requirement that we do that, and it is really about how do we avoid starting a wildfire, and we need to think more broadly, what do we do if there is a wildfire coming at us, right? So, if that means that our annual wildfire mitigation plan, the scope of that document should be expanded, or we have a separate plan that's more of an emergency preparedness plan or something like that. But I think understanding what are the limits of what our current wildfire plans cover and what they don't cover. Because I think that there's this is a much bigger and interconnected situation than what we've usually seen. Anyone else, you want to add anything along these lines, or how do you guys feel about having kind of a wildfire-focused meeting?
I'm not opposed to the idea of being prepared. I'm just wondering if the GWP staff and commission is the right key for that. It seems to me more of the fire department should be more involved in this. Sure, water is one of the things, whether they have the personnel, they have the technicals, whether they need helicopters or whatever, which is way beyond anything that GWP can do for them. So maybe it's more appropriate for the fire department to present something like what you've asked for to City Council, and then if there is something in particular that the fire department, after their research or experience with LA, says, well, from a GWP perspective or the water perspective or any that this department can do, these are the points, and then we can address it for this department. I'm just thinking what is being asked is way beyond and above that what GWP can at this point get involved in, given the lack of personnel that they may have to address all these issues. I'm not opposed to being ready or prepared. I'm just wondering, let's pick the right department and the right body, whether us or City Council, to check, and then City Council maybe could decide to kind of delegate the lower portions or the smaller portions of that study to different departments, whether it's the GWP or I think there's another, the one that maintains the road. What's the name of that department?
Public Works.
Public Works and that kind of stuff. That's my concern.
I would say the more eyeballs looking at this, the better. I think it'd be great if we had the fire department coming in and making a presentation and Chisholm making his presentation, and the more the better, because we might just come up with one idea that ends up at City Council, but it might be the idea.
I tend to think that the more we air this issue, the better as well. I think Roland's making some good points that there's other departments that should probably be taking the lead on it as well. But we are so fundamental to the safety of this community, our power system and our water system. So I think what you're suggesting is really good. And like you say, maybe it's not March, maybe it's April. but that we come back and we just really uncover everything we can possibly do. Be prepared.
So thank you all for your thoughts, and to address your comments, well, maybe we just keep the scope limited to what's within this department's control, and you might have some thoughts about how to define that and make sure we're not overreaching and trying to do too much. And I'd also like your thoughts about timing. You know, we want to make sure we're responsive. We're in a constant 12-month fire season, so there's not like we'll get it before next year. But I think we also want to wait until the dust settles and we really can learn the lessons from this tragic incident. So I'm asking you for your thoughts. You may not be here to oversee this, and that's another thing we want to make sure we don't lose this as a continuity issue. So I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, this discussion will be part of the minutes, and my successor and the staff will bring it back. But I think it is a good idea to review the problems that the LA Fire Department had and also the LA water system had, and fully flesh those out so we can learn from them. And then the second thing is, I don't know if we need to have the fire department here, but I think our water manager will meet with them and see what kind of draw, pick a scenario of a wildfire in one of the canyons, and okay, we have 5 engines that's going to draw this volume. We need some kind of assurance that our reservoirs and our system can support that. So I think that's warranted. It's a good time to look at it. But it would help to look at LA first and then talk to the fire department and then say, yes, raise our confidence level that we're prepared. With regard to the fire mitigation plan, we have a very robust one, and it.
But is it correct to say that
it works?
The scope of that plan is to make sure we're not starting fires?
Yes.
Okay, it's not how we react to fires necessarily?
Yes, and I think the point about 60-mile-an-hour hurricane-level winds is something that we can look at from our distribution. As Mr. Scorza said, these new improvements with the converted 12 kV held up better than the 4 kV, so we can give a report on how that worked, and maybe we can do some things to accelerate those improvements.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see
from a wind perspective.
See some numerical or geographic analysis of number of outages on different circuits based on the different voltage. So
right.
I also think that our experience here is really just informed as people reading the newspaper, but as experts in this field, there's not a lot of coverage about the water system in Altadena. Did it work well? Did it not work well? And so I think that's something you guys would be better positioned to dig into and make sure we're learning all the lessons, not just from the headlines. So.
Good. Yeah, at least April, maybe May, but I'll leave that to the staff and the new general manager.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for noting this, and I appreciate your support on this. So we may need to shift some things around on the agenda forecast to accommodate. So we'll just give you guys a chance to noodle on that, and then we'll see. And I think we're all good with skipping on a February meeting since we're meeting so late in the month now. So great. Okay. Well, let's call this one complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
So meeting adjourned.
Yes. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for your time and doing a comprehensive review. Feels like a really good position to put us in going into a new year, potentially with new leadership coming in, and a new commissioner as well. So.
May I have a motion, please?
I motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.